get started. All right, making sure I hit record for those who missed it. Okay, and I apologize because I'm wearing multiple hats today. It's just me on this meeting. But NC Counts Coalition, we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Hopefully you've been in contact with us or you've attended one of our meetings. Most important thing that I usually point out is that we are not part of the NC Complete Count Commission, and we are not part of the U.S. Census Bureau. Really, that's what you need to know. We work closely with both entities. They are our partners. However, the commission is appointed by the governor, and the U.S. Census Bureau is a federal organization. So again, we're a nonprofit 501c3. We try to bring folks together to coordinate efforts to reduce duplicative efforts for census outreach, as well as to provide our stakeholders and partners with resources for a complete and accurate 2020 census count in North Carolina. So with that, we serve as an umbrella organization. We have resources for information and best practices. I encourage you to check out our website if you haven't already. We consider ourselves to be strategic planners, which we'll kind of go through the Get Out the Count plan and what that looks like. And then last but not least, which is why you're all here today, is we are a funding hub. So we do have a community outreach grant program to expand the capacity of nonprofit organizations doing census work. So why do we care about the census? Of course, it's political representation, federal funding, community planning, and economic development. I won't go through that because hopefully by this point, everyone knows exactly what's at stake here for North Carolina. So going straight into Get Out the Count. So if this is your first time applying for a grant with us, or if you haven't been in contact with NC Counts, Get Out the Count, I apologize, GOTC is actually a national effort. And NC Counts Coalition, we serve as the statewide hub for this national census campaign to reach historically undercounted communities, better known as hard to count communities by the U.S. Census Bureau. So there are several different entities that play into GOTC. The biggest one that you probably need to know of for this project is Blueprint North Carolina, which is one of our strategic partners, who is the civic engagement table for state voices here in North Carolina. And so we partner with them to implement this outreach program, including this community grant process. So what is the strategy? We had a very robust strategy that we worked on for about 3 years in regards to what our GOTC plan would look like for North Carolina. Of course, some of that has changed because of COVID, but just to kind of give you a very broad overview, you know, we took some time out. We worked with Carolina Demography to look at where we thought hard to count communities would be based across North Carolina for this census, based off of 2010 census data, as well as American Community, the American Community Survey, recent numbers from 2017, 2018 with population counts and estimates, and looked at some of the risk factors such as where communities of color would be located, where young or households with young children would be located, where there might be a digital divide, to come up with like this top tier county list as to where we want to target our outreach in North Carolina to get to the most accurate and complete census count for our state. And so with that, these are our 15 target counties. Most of them, of course, are rural, as you would probably expect. Throughout North Carolina, where we have been really targeting our outreach. And if you ever need help to, you know, kind of look to see where these counties are located, I definitely encourage you to check out CUNY's Hard to Count map, which, you know, you could kind of drill down and see first on a national level just what hard to count communities look like, but also on a local level where some of the communities are located in North Carolina, as well as there is a hard to count community interactive map on our website that was developed in partnership with Carolina Demography. These resources may not be as useful for you today. It'll be helpful for you to kind of poke around and see where the census tracts are, especially the CUNY map. But the map that Becky's going to show you at the end is probably going to be your best tool and resources. But I encourage you to check out all of these maps to get a better grasp in regards to census tracts and what the population is and the demographics and how you're going to target your outreach. So then we identified and engaged trusted messengers. So we do have the North Carolina Census Task Force, which meets every third Wednesday. Our next meeting is next week, where it's a group of nonprofit organizations and we strategize for the census. So we really started out as more of a task force, coming up with ways to advocate for the census, as well as forming this GOTC plan. At this point, the task force continues to meet every third Wednesday of the month. And we provide updates on what's happening for census outreach, as well as it's really geared towards nonprofits. So if there are concerns within the community, if there are challenges, then this is like an open forum for folks to engage with each other so we could address those collectively. And this is actually a really old list of GOTC partners. The updated list is on our website, but this just gives you an idea of some of the organizations that we work with for Get Out the Count. So the strategy then went to develop resources to support capacity for nonprofits, which we did that a lot over the past couple of years, providing our partners with target messaging. I encourage you, before you start any outreach or before you write any grant, that you should understand how to message the population that you'll be doing outreach to. Collateral and literature, NC Counts has developed a lot of literature around the census, as well as our partners have. And we try to keep those updated on our website, as well as through our monthly newsletter. Best practices, our rapid response, we had a rapid response. It didn't really work because it didn't include COVID, which was probably what we really needed rapid response for. And then of course, our community outreach grant program. So jumping right into it, developing resources, what you're all here for today, the Community Outreach Grant Program. So this is a program in partnership again with Blueprint North Carolina, where we have established a mini grant program. The grants this round will be anywhere from $7,000 to $20,000. So we've increased the amount because of the understanding that we might have some partners who need to do digital outreach, and that tends to be a little bit more expensive. But we try to make it a very reasonable range. And so this is like the last part of our mobilizing, which is regranting and getting the funding out to our nonprofit partners so that you all could do the work that you do best to move folks towards 2020 census participation. So what does the grant process look like? First of all, before we get started, you do have to use the online grant portal. So if you've seen the PDF, there are two links, one I think at the beginning and one at the very end that says click here to submit your grant. That is how you will need to submit your grant for this process. And like I mentioned before, we do expect this to be our final round of grants. For this round, we're doing it a little bit differently. Our prior grant process included hard deadlines. This will actually be a rolling deadline. So as of right now, we have a pot of about $200,000 that we will be regranting back out. If we receive more funding from our funders, we'll add to that pot. We'll let folks know. But as of right now, it's $200,000. And it opened up last week on July 1st. And every Friday, there will be a cutoff. So if you submit your grant, for example, by this Friday at 6:00 p.m., we're going to say that the cutoff for 6 is going to be 6 o'clock. It will be reviewed the very next week. And our committee will meet, we'll go through the proposals, and we'll decide if those proposals receive funding or not. Ooh, I'm sorry. There's some folks in the waiting room. Let me see if I could get them in. Sorry, everyone. I don't think I can get them in while I'm presenting. Let me pause my share. Okay. All right. Okay. So the grant timeline. So like I mentioned, it will be on a rolling basis, and this will be until the funding is gone. So if you get your grant, if, I don't know, we get 30 proposals on Friday and they're all amazing proposals and the grant committee decides to fund all of those proposals, then there might not be any funding left for the next week. I don't expect that to happen. But just to kind of let you know, the way that we'll be going about it is kind of first come, first serve. But we'll be doing this on an evaluation process. So there will actually be like priorities. So what are our priorities? I mentioned the 15 priority counties that we have. And these counties are listed for you right now in order. So Northampton, Robinson, Duplin, Anson, Bertie, Sampson, Scotland, Hope, Vance, Halifax, Edgecombe, Cumberland, Durham, Mecklenburg, and Guilford. Those are going to be in that order, starting with Northampton, ending with Guilford, our priority counties. Outside of that, if you are here with us today and you are not doing outreach in one of those counties, that's okay. That is okay. We're still going to accept proposals for second priority, which is going to be census tracts that are performing below the state average, which was 58% on the 26th of June. So for example, if you are in Wake County, and I'm just throwing out Wake County because it's not on here, and if you say, I want to do, outreach in this census tract and their current participation rate is 45%, your proposal would be considered for this grant process. And I do encourage folks outside of these 15 counties to apply. For example, our second round, once we distributed priority counties, there was funding left over. And so there were a few counties outside of those priority counties that were also funded. So, you just have to be specific in the census tract. You have to let us know that, it's performing below that 58% or the current state response rate. And regardless, you have to target a hard to count community. So there has to be either a digital divide, or you're still doing outreach to young children, or you're doing outreach to the African American population or the Latino population or the API population. So that's how we are going to prioritize it for this grant. Let's talk a little bit about funded activities and what will not be funded. So this is not a grant for marketing and advertising, and I cannot stress that more. Like, this is for outreach. This is for folks to engage and move people to participation. And so with that, we will be funding direct contact strategies. Billboards typically will not be funded unless it's a very special circumstance. For example, I know there's one organization that will be doing a billboard that kind of changes every other week, that gauges, where census participation is. That might be allowed, but in general, billboards will not be allowed. You can't use this funding for website management services, participation in a complete count committee. So for example, if you are a nonprofit organization and somebody from your organization is sitting on a municipality's or county's complete count committee, you cannot write into your proposal to fund their time on that complete count committee. We're just not funding those types of services or activities. Participation in media events or interviews. We typically will not fund those. We do not allow the regranting of funds because we are already regranting funds. And advertising in most circumstances will not be allowed. However, because of COVID, there will be certain situations such as if you're doing Facebook ads, because you might already have this outreach of 5,000 followers to a very specific community. In those types of circumstances, we will consider advertising. But an example of something we wouldn't do would be taking out an ad. I don't know if anyone reads the newspaper, but in the local newspaper, or a TV advertisement. That type of advertising we will not be funding. And then talking about evaluation. So this is really important. I'm going to go through all of the different sections of evaluation and just kind of give you some of the things that we look at and the things that you should consider as you're pulling your grant together. So first, organizational considerations, relationship and experience. We want to know that you have a relationship with the community that you're doing outreach to, and that you've done some outreach to them before, or you know how to do that outreach. Capacity is really important, and a lot of times folks skip this on their grant proposal. We need to know that you have the capacity to take on the work that you're proposing to do. And if you don't have the capacity, then we need to know who you're writing into your grant to fund. So if you're hiring someone to do the work, we need to know that that person's going to be a project manager, et cetera. But this is really important because a lot of times folks will write in, we're gonna call, 10,000 people, but we don't know if they're using volunteers, we don't know if they're using staff time, and then they give us a budget and it doesn't all match up. So it's really important that you take some time to provide us with your capacity, and that's within the grant application. Representation. So the organization or project leadership is reflective of the community that you're focused on. And when we say this, we mean racially, ethnically, economically, and geographically. And then budget size. So this is really geared towards smaller community-based organizations. So we do ask that your civic engagement organization budget should be less than $500,000. So if your overall budget is more than, $500,000, but civic engagement is only like, $20,000 maybe, and I'm just throwing that out there, you would fall within that range of $500,000. All right, so tactics. Again, they need to be to historically undercounted communities, hard to count communities. And the more specific you are is the better. So again, Becky's going to go through and kind of show you how to find your census tract so that you have a better idea in regards to how to be specific. But a few best practices is tell us the exact census tract that you are going to target, especially if you're not within a priority county. So again, just using, let's see, I'll use Onslow County. Well, no, I think Onslow is a target county. I will use Wake County again. So if you're doing Wake County, it's really important that you say, hey, we're doing outreach in XYZ census tract, because we want to know that it's not going to be this broad blanket campaign to Wake County. If you could include the demographics, which all these mapping tools that I showed you before, it's going to give you the demographics of those census tracts. It's going to break it down for you. That's even better. And again, just tell us who you're targeting. So if you're targeting the census tract because of low internet access, tell us that. The more information that you give us in regards to who you're targeting is the better, because it makes it easier for the committee. All right, so metrics. Metrics is so important. And the reason that is so important because we have to have some way to measure the work that you are doing. And I feel like this is typically an area that a lot of our proposals that we receive, they lack metrics. Typically, when there are metrics, we would go back, or when a proposal would lack metrics, we would go back and we would actually ask for follow-up. Unfortunately, because of the time frame and the capacity, we can't do that this time. So I'm going to spend some time on the metrics so that you have an idea as to what we're looking for. And you should have as clear as possible metrics within your proposal. If there are no metrics, which happens a lot, like I said, typically we would go back and we would ask the organization that submitted the proposal to provide the metrics. We're not doing that this time. You will just get your proposal back. It will not go through whichever round or whichever deadline you submitted it for, and we'll let you know, hey, there's no metrics, resubmit with metrics. So I really hope that you will try to put some metrics in your proposal the first time so that it doesn't get kicked back to you. Because it just takes too much time for us to follow up and to like teach people how to do metrics. It's better for you to at least take a stab. So what I've done is I've included like a few examples, right? So let's say you're gonna do a mailer, right? So you could say, we're gonna mail a census reminder to 300 households in Tract 509 in Wake County between August 3rd to August 8th. That's good for us, right? Because we know how many people you're targeting, we know what census tract you're going to be in, and we know your timeline. If you're doing a caravan, because we also understand that there are going to be some circumstances where it will be harder to, provide an exact deliverable or something that's measurable. So for a caravan, if you choose to do that, you might say, we're going to have at least 20 vehicles driving through this census tract in this county. We just need something to gauge the impact. If you are doing a couch party on Facebook, then you could say, our organization currently has 1,000 followers on Facebook. We're going to engage at least 200 viewers during a Facebook couch party. And again, these are just a few examples as to ways that you could do metrics. Our next slide is actually evaluation. And Juliana?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So Juliana's going to go over a few tips for this chart that you might see.
Perfect. So as Stacy was saying, there's different types of tactics that we hope people will engage, and we really hope to see proposals that will reflect, the diversity of the communities we're working with, the diversity of the organizations, and obviously the different levels of capacity orgs have. And so when you select the RFP, click on the RFP online, a chart similar to the one on your screen will pop up. And what this chart allows you to do is really build your budget based on the tactics that you'll be implementing. For example, if your organization is looking to pursue live calls, the chart states that cost per call tends to be around 0.62 cents. The chart allows you to populate that with the number of calls you would want to make under the gold member category, the cost per unit. So the chart provides a range, right, a potential cost, but you can adjust accordingly to what the costs have been for your organization. And then it allows you to populate the total cost. So in this case, the group is submitting a proposal for 1,500 calls, a cost per unit of 75 cents, which then equals in $750 in budget. You see that the chart allows for also door canvassing, SMS or texting, relational organizing, and relational organizing, happy to chat with folks offline what that means. Relational organizing usually means that you're leveraging individuals in your network to mobilize other individuals in your network. So maybe if you're an organization that regularly works with youth, you're asking that membership of young people to convince 5 people in their network to complete the census questionnaire. Event-based contact, again, it's hard to know what this is going to be defined as, right, if social distancing rules continue to apply through October 31st. But we provide a space, in this case, 4 events at $250 costs each for a total of $1,000 in funding. And then the last piece is sites-based contacts, for example, like help centers. And something that comes up through this site-based context, an example that might apply to work that's happening now is maybe you host a drive-through census assistance, right? Where you're providing, walking people socially distanced through how to complete their census questionnaire and helping them. You know, when we originally came up with that category, we thought computer labs would be open and we'd be able to assist people in person. So all of that to say is that once you populate this chart, that's going to total, you know, the cost of the different tactics you're employing, and that's going to be what you include in your total budget and will allow you to land in what that amount looks like. I see to the right, the slide has additional details you might want to include in the budget, including travel, printing, and other pieces that might not fall directly within this tactic chart. You'll see that the box at the bottom also allows for you to include other outreach strategies that perhaps are not covered in the chart that's been provided through the RFP. You know, I recognize that we've, you know, NC Counts has been pretty innovative in identifying what can be done, you know, while we operate and try to do this work during a pandemic. But I think I speak for Stacy, the NC Counts team, and the team that's reviewing these proposals, that we really welcome new ideas and would love to hear from all of you, any new ideas you might have into how we can effectively reach community members. But I think that's it for me, Stacy, unless you have anything else you'd want me to chime in on.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Juliana. And just to, again, stress some of the things that Juliana said, and it's within the RFP as well in the PDF, we are looking for COVID appropriate and friendly outreach tactics. It could be a food drive distribution. It could be a caravan. It could be digital. And just like Juliana said, we encourage you to be creative. So we had a partner who did literature drops. So they didn't do the traditional door-to-door canvassing where, you know, you might actually speak to someone. They just did walk through the neighborhood and dropped off literature on doorsteps. It could be a number of activities, but, you know, try to give us as much information as possible. And like Juliana said, if it doesn't fit within this box, then use that other outreach strategies. So a caravan, for example, might need to go into the other outreach strategies so that we have an idea in regards to what you are doing. And the last part that I'm going to touch on today is alignment. This is really, really important. We love collaborations and we encourage collaborations, especially because there is not a lot of capacity for census outreach in North Carolina, considering that there was no funding on the state level. And so we really want folks to work together and try to reduce duplicative efforts. With that said, if there is a complete count committee within your community, we encourage you to connect with them prior to submitting your proposal and working with them once you start to implement it so that, you know, if they are funding one aspect of census, you're doing something else. Again, trying to expand that capacity for census outreach within your target area. If there are several organizations within your area and, you know, you all could come together to do a big grant proposal, we encourage that as well. The only thing is, if you do a collaboration, please let us know who the collaborative partners are and let us know what role each partner is going to play so that we know that this is a real, true collaboration. And if you're going to, you know, split the funding, if you could, you know, put that on there as well so that we know that the funding is going to be split among these different organizations. And in those situations, you are welcome to submit a proposal that is outside of that 7 to 20,000, right? So let's say there's 5 orgs within a region and you're all collaborating to do a proposal. It might be appropriate for you to do a $50,000, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, but 50,000, maybe it's 10,000 per organization. It would have to be a massive plan in order for you to get that amount, of course, but just again, giving you an example of what a collaboration might look like. So with that, this is my contact information. I did see some comments in the group chat. I will definitely provide slides as well as, like I said, this is being recorded from the beginning of the slideshow, at least all the way up until now. and as well as Dr. Tippett's part is going to be recorded as well, and it will be on our YouTube page. So you could always go back and watch it. If you have any questions, you have my contact information here. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Dr. Rebecca Tippett. Becky, are you there? I see her. Let's see. Oh, I think she dropped off.
She says she's trying to chat. I see her in the chat box.
Oh. Oh, she's here. She's trying to talk. Let's see. Becky, you might have to log out and log back in or call in. Because you're not on mute on my end. Okay, she's gonna call back in. All right, so while she's doing that, are there any questions in the chat box?
I have a question. It's not in the chat box. Can you take it, or do I need to type it in the chat box?
Yeah, I'll go for it.
Okay, my question. I have looked at the census map. I have kind of tweaked my the work that I'm currently doing to focus on the towns or the smaller towns within Vance County that haven't participated. At what point, or if ever, will it be available, like specific people and names? Because what I'm running into is when we're having events and hosting things, if people just want to get done quickly, you say, hey, have you taken the census? You need any information? Oh, I took it already. But it's not reflective in the numbers.
So unfortunately, we don't have access to that type of data where it actually gets down to like the address or the household to see who has participated and who hasn't. The most we could do is with the mapping tools or the raw numbers that we get from the Census Bureau. Yeah, that's always a little difficult. And we always worry about that as well, especially when we do events that chances are somebody might take the census and they've already done it. And we just kind of hope that the Census Bureau, when they're going through the data, they'll be able to take that information out. Becky, can you hear me? Okay, she's going to try to call in from her phone. Are there any other questions? What is the upper range for the grant request? So the grant can go anywhere from $7,000 to $20,000. We really try to stay within that range. Every now and then we might do something that's less than $7,000, but because of the administrative work to work with grantees and to follow up, we really do try to keep it within the range of 7 to 20. And the only time that we go out of that range is if it's a collaborative grant. So there have been a couple of circumstances where a grantee did receive more than, the prior grant range was 7 to 15. And in those circumstances, they received more than 15 because it was 3 or 4 different organizations on there.
So Stacy, can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, it was something with my headset and my laptop. So apologies for that, everybody. Unplugged one thing and it now works. So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, so I just need screen sharing enabled.
All right. Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this map, I think there's a link to the map in the RFP, correct, Stacy?
There is, yep.
Okay. So this map is census self-response rates as of June 26th. And I was also going to share out an Excel file that has some of these details details there because sometimes it's easier to kind of identify a set of communities and then drill down looking at the data in a table format. So a couple of things to know about this is really kind of that criteria for the grant was, and that second priority is tracks that have a self-response rate below the North Carolina average of 58%. And those are shown in this dark blue here. So you can see that that's actually a large portion of census tracts in the state are below the state average, in part because our more populated tracts in urban areas are having slightly higher response rates. So much more the rural areas are falling below that 58%. When you hover over a tract, it'll show you kind of the top line statistics about what's going on there to try to give, so that you can quickly identify, okay, this might be a low responding tract. Is it near where I'm trying to go? And if so, what are its characteristics? The first thing is kind of an overall, what's the population there and how many are in group quarters? And I put that there because there are some tracts where over 90% of the population are in group quarters. So a low self-response rate is a problem, but it may not be as much of a priority as a place where very little of the population are in group quarters, because group quarters are counted through a different process. And so then it just kind of compares to the state and how they responded online versus mail or phone. The second piece here is the census contact strategy, which internet first was prioritized for places with high internet access, and it was English or bilingual. You can see this tract that we're hovering over in Warren County is 98% internet choice English. So that means that that was likely identified as low internet communities. You can see by their response rate that 34.1% have responded by mail phone versus just 20.3% online. So you know that this is going to be a community where low response is possibly due to low internet access. So go down, also shows some, I lost it, but a different tract shows you have after that race and ethnicity. So you have the distribution, which will help identify whether or not those tracts then meet the hard to count target communities. And then the other characteristics there are like the percentage of households with no internet, college students, because we know that that's a special risk right now due to COVID, foreign born, the poverty rate, the percentage children under 5, and then how many households are renter households, just to get a little bit more context on the community. One of the ways though to really try to drill down is you can focus on a specific county. So we'll just go with Warren because that was the county that I first zoomed over. So that will bring up just that county on the map, if it works. Okay, sometimes Tableau can be a little fidgety. So that will bring up just Warren County. And you can see that all tracts in Warren County actually are responding below the state average. And that may be a little bit overwhelming to navigate, right? So how do you prioritize among those tracts? So this slider here can actually allow you to focus just on a specific subset of response rates. So you could slide, it looks like the top response is 89.8%. We can slide down to, are there any tracts that have below like a 37% response rate? And that could help identify, okay, if you have a cluster of potential targets, but you only want to focus on the ability to focus on a few, are there places that should get higher priority? And so you can see here, these two tracts have very low self-response rates, even compared to the broader community. So that might be one way to help focus. So this is really meant to help identify kind of the geographic location of potential target tracts. And then I will share with Stacy and NC Counts Coalition the underlying data set so that once you get that, once you identify potential tracts and their tract numbers, you can then look them up in that data file and understand maybe if you're considering a few different locations, which ones have the characteristics that are best suited for your outreach strategies. So Stacy, I can stop sharing my screen now, or I can keep it up to answer questions specific to the map if there are any.
Are there any questions for Dr. Tippett specific to the map?
Okay.
Hi, Stacy, this is Frankie. Sorry I was late. There are 2 questions in the chat box. One had to do with exactly I guess what she's doing, I was looking for Robeson County so I could see what tracts there were.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question has to do with the upper range for the collaborative grants.
Sure. So, are you pulling that up?
So I can pull up, I was going to show, and I'll send this out as well to you, Stacy, for additional follow-up.
Okay.
As one, and of course now it's going to be hard for me to find exactly where I go to get this. But what I will show, well, I will send out some screenshots and some information on how to find a census tract map for census tracts are not necessarily a geography that is normally used for people. And I'll just show on, just focus on Robeson right now if we want to. They are statistical geography defined by the Census Bureau. So they do not necessarily align with like local concepts of neighborhoods, but they are the smallest area that we can get kind of high quality statistical information about how communities are self-responding to the census, as well as having information about the characteristics of those communities. So this is Robeson County, and then hovering over this would, tell you what tract number that is. And then hopefully that could enable a specific lookup, and I'll send out some resources on how to find a tract map that just identifies which tracts are where.
Awesome. Thank you, Becky. And I do have, let's see, I'm going to go through all the chat. I don't see anything else about the map specifically, but if you do have a map question, you could type it in the chat box and I'll go back to Becky so that she could pull up her screen share. So Dr. Powell, you asked about the higher end for a collaborative proposal. We honestly don't have a higher end. It's just whatever is reasonable. I would think it wouldn't be more than $20,000 per org, because individually you couldn't apply for more than 20,000. But yeah, it's just, whatever is needed for each org to get the work done in regards to budget for a collaborative proposal. I did have someone ask for some examples of how nonprofits can reach communities at these uncertain times. Excellent question. So we have a few examples within the RFP, but a few ways that our partners have been doing outreach. A lot of folks have been pivoting with whatever they're currently doing. So if they're doing food distributions, they've been providing census information. We've had some folks do neighborhood canvassing where they drop off the literature, but they don't actually speak with the residents. We have a lot of orgs that are still continuing to engage in phone calls to just remind people to participate in the census, as well as SMS text messaging campaigns if they have that capacity. We also have some folks who have switched over to digital. So some of our organizations do like memes all day long around census, or we have one organization that hosts a weekly couch party, which is where they have a DJ and they have music, and they encourage folks to participate in the census, as well as one of our organizations actually worked with the radio station to do a couch party. So a lot of different ways that you could continue with the outreach. But again, anything that you submit to us, we will make sure that it is COVID friendly if we are going to fund it, because we want to protect the health of our partners as well as the general public. But yeah, definitely encourage you to check out some of the ways that we listed in the RFP, as well as we try to highlight our partners on our social media accounts when they do stuff. So if you go through our Facebook and Twitter, you should see some of the events that our partners have been participating in. Another question from Vicky: are prior grant recipients eligible to apply for this final round? Yes, you are. However, depending on how many proposals we get, we might choose to fund new grantees first before we go to prior grantees, especially if our prior grantees have funding still that they haven't used. But yeah, definitely. If you have received funding from us before, and if you want to do additional work, especially because, you know, the timeline has been extended. So maybe you used all of your funding because literally you would have ended your grant cycle last week. So if you want to apply for funding, you know, to take you through to the end of October because you want to do some additional work, you are definitely open to applying, and we will consider that. Are incentives and gifts allowable? For the census operation, yes, they are. For our grant funding, we haven't really spoken about that. I would think that we probably would. It just depends on what the incentive is. For example, if it's a t-shirt or a swag item, I think that the committee would be up to funding that, or if it's like a small token, like a $10 gift card. I think that that would be allowed as well, but incentives are definitely allowed. Let's see. Metrics, as far as the metrics, would tracking involve taking names of people that we help to register? No, definitely not. So I will also send out the link for you know, kind of making sure that you're in compliance within the rules and regulations of the Census Bureau. So we definitely don't encourage you to keep any personal information. But what you can do is just, you know, keep a tally. Like, you know, I spoke to one person and they agreed to take the census. I don't know if anyone's using pledge cards right now. I don't know how helpful they would be, especially because enumerators are going out. But before, that's what we did was, you know, you ask someone to take a pledge and then you send it back to that person, you mail it back, and that reminds them to take the census. But that would be another way. It's just collecting pledge cards. So yeah, if you have commitments from folks who say they're going to take the census, you literally could just take a tally mark. You know, we set up a table at this food distribution, and 60 people, we provided 60 people with literature, and all 60 of them agreed to participate in the census. You could do it that way. Or we had a mobile questionnaire assistance center. And while, I don't know, maybe you're volunteering at a COVID site where they're doing testing. I don't know that many people would take the census there, but just again, throwing out examples. You know, as people came through, 20 people participated in the census. You just keep the tally mark. And that's really all we need. So when you're writing your grant, just say what you're aiming for. So again, if you're doing a food distribution, and if typically you have 200 cars coming through your food distribution and you want to engage at least 100 of them in census, then you would say that we're going to do a food distribution. Typically we have this many vehicles roll through. We are going to engage at least 100 people that show up for this food distribution by providing them with census literature, as well as we will have a tablet available if they would like to participate in the census. So yeah, so that's how you could, you know, keep track in regards to, you know, how many folks you have. Is there a map that allows for overlay of low responses and zip code or street names? Becky, is that probably the CUNY map?
I don't know that they use zip codes because those low response rates are not reported by zip code. So that's not a geography being reported by the Bureau.
Okay.
CUNY map may allow drilling into, at least I don't think it's reported because I looked into it and I had to aggregate tracks up to zip codes.
Okay.
So the CUNY map might be good for getting that street map layer. I can also look to see if we can toggle a street map layer onto the Tableau map that we just shared.
Hey, good afternoon. Stacy, can you hear me? This is Judith.
Yes.
Hi. Yes, I don't mind doing that. Yes, there is a toggle switch for zip codes on the hard to count map.
On the CUNY map?
Yep, I think that's
Okay.
the CUNY map. That it will overlay zip codes on top of anything else. So there is like a little toggle switch that you can use. I've used it.
That's good to know. One thing I want to caution people about is the QD map is great, but we are using different definitions of census tracts. So we are using the 2010 geographies and they are using the 2020 geographies. So there may not be perfect alignment between the census numbering.
Okay.
That's good to know.
All right, so the next question, do we also have to register people or help them fill out the census? No, so typically an enumerator, they're sworn by oath in order to keep the information confidential, and to maintain the integrity of the census operation as well as the integrity of the data that's being collected. So no, typically, you provide them, if you have a tablet, you provide them with a tablet so that they can participate. If they have any questions as they're doing it, I think you're more than welcome to answer those questions. But we would typically discourage you from actually doing the census for someone, unless it's like a family member, because again, we just want to maintain the integrity not only of the data but also of the operation. We really try to stress to people, no one is going to, no random person is going to ask you for your information, et cetera, et cetera. But if you have a relationship with someone and they know that you're not from the Census Bureau, and that they're kind of taking a risk by providing you with their data, for example, I helped my best friend do it, that would be okay. But typically, if you're doing a site, provide the resources, answer questions, but you shouldn't actually be like doing the census for them. Advertising, very good question, Judith. So it does not necessarily include radio station commercials, but it's really just going to depend. So if you're doing radio commercials to promote an event, I would think that we would allow that. As well as if you already have an existing relationship, maybe with the radio station where, the community is familiar with your organization and doing ads for something, we might allow that as well. I think advertising is really going to be on a case-by-case basis. The really big thing that we want to discourage is like general billboards going up, or I'm trying to think of another example, or just like a very generic radio ad. And the reason why is because, again, this grant is really to allow some direct contact strategies as much as possible. But with that being said, because of COVID, there is some flexibility in there. So, a good example, again, would be a caravan. So if you're working with the radio station to promote the caravan, then yeah, that type of advertising would be allowed. But if you're just asking for $20,000 to do all radio ads on a radio station, that's likely not going to be funded.
Stacy, this is great. I just want to follow up on my question, the previous question regarding, fill out sessions, form or application or online. Yeah, because one of the problems we experience in the community is that because a lot of these people are like former refugees and they probably only 10%, of them like speak English. But the children, are good, but the parents, don't do much and don't speak much English, and they don't really know much about, computer or internet. So mostly sometimes, they will come to our center, with their paper and then, to ask for help to fill out, our sessions. In this case, are we allowed to help with that?
I think there's kind of a gray area when it comes to helping. I think in those types of circumstances, it would be okay for you to help, especially if they're coming into your center and they're asking for help. I think the biggest thing is just making sure, one, again, that they know, I always say a disclaimer. I'm an attorney, so I'm like, give a disclaimer, where you just let them know I'm not from the U.S. Census Bureau. But yeah, if you have a trusted relationship with someone and if they're coming to you and if they're saying, hey, we have this form, we have some questions, I think it's appropriate to help them at that time. But the biggest thing is taking their personal information and putting it in there. But yeah, it's a gray area, but I think that would be okay.
Thank you.
No problem. So it is 3 o'clock and I definitely want to be respectful of anyone's time. So if you have questions, I'm more than happy to stay on and answer those questions for maybe the next 5 or 10 minutes. If you don't, and if you are just really excited about this opportunity and you want to get right to work on pulling your proposal together, I welcome you to do that as well. I hope that this has been helpful to everyone. Again, please, take your time in pulling this together and provide as much detail as possible. Because we're doing reviews weekly, And because our amazing grant committee, these are just volunteers from organizations that we work with, we're not going to have a lot of time to do, you know, follow-up conversations and say, hey, you submitted a great proposal, but there's no budget. There's no budget. It's just going to get kicked back and you're going to have to resubmit again. So I really encourage you to take your time, read through the entire RFP, make sure you have an understanding of it, and then go do it online. And also remember that the online form does not save. So I would probably recommend that you do it in a Word document, copy and paste, and submit it. Because I have had that happen to me before with the grant proposal where I got all the way to the end and I lost all my information and had to start all over again. So just a little tip from me. But other than that, thank you all so much for your current partnership, your future partnership, your interest. And with that, I don't see any more questions. So I will wrap it up and I look forward to reading your proposals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy.
No problem.
Take care.
Thanks, Stacy. Appreciate everything.
Yep,
No
thanks,
problem.
Stacy. Have a good one.
All right.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good day. Y'all be safe. Judith, I'll talk to you later. Call me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.